I would like to welcome everyone to our webinar. Now we're ready to start, but before we begin, I would like to introduce myself and our company. My name is Amina Rakhmankulova. I'm a multicultural marketing, communications, and research consultant at the Load Agency. The Load Agency is a multicultural marketing communications company. We are based in Melbourne, and we offer a range of services for effective and culturally tailored communications, including research, strategy development, translations, and media outreach. Our clients are businesses, organizations, and institutions that need to reach culturally and linguistically diverse audiences all around Australia. Now, back to the webinar. I'll give you a bit of a background. From June 20th to 26th this week, Australia is celebrating the Refugee Week. This time the theme is unity, and it is aimed to promote togetherness and harmony and remind us that it is diversity, the unique mix of ideas, worldviews, and life stories that created the great way of life we have here today. And to mark this important week, we decided to hold this webinar to help educate and raise awareness amongst the general public about such serious topics as migrations and refugee settlement. And we invited two special guests who I'll introduce in a moment. But first, I'll give you some housekeeping rules. You're welcome to ask any questions you want throughout the webinar via the chat function, and we'll address those as many as we can within the time that we have. And any unanswered questions we'll try to answer via email that you'll receive after the webinar. So let's welcome our guests. We've got Grace Faith Kyle. Sorry if I pronounced your name right. She's Liberian by nationality, and after the stints in the UK and New Zealand, she came to Australia and discovered a love for education. Grace joins us from Melbourne. And the second guest is Emmanuel Musoni. He hails from Rwanda, but grew up in Ugandan refugee camps. As well as being a refugee himself, Emmanuel is the executive manager of Great Lakes Agency for Peace and Development International, whose mission is to improve the lives of migrants and refugees from Africa and beyond in Australia and help them integrate socially, culturally, and economically. Emmanuel joins us from Sydney. Hello, Emmanuel. Hello, Grace.
Hi.
Good to have you here. So I guess hi, good to see you. Well, let's start with a general question. Would you mind to give us some background as we're discussing the refugee experiences? Would you mind to give us some background? What made you leave your country? Where you're coming from? What was the situation like? And we'll start with Emmanuel.
All right, thank you very much. And the organizers, the audience, for giving us the floor. My country is Rwanda. That's where I hail from, as you mentioned. And but I grew up in Uganda as a refugee for 16 years. And then I went back to Rwanda, from Rwanda to Australia, where I have been since 2011. And now this month, it's now 10 years since I came to Australia. Now, looking back into the refugee life, do you want me to keep going?
Oh, we'll follow up. It's just some background information to give the context for our viewers. And Grace, where are you coming from and what made you leave your home country?
Okay, thank you for the opportunity to be part of this webinar. My name is Grace Faith Kyle. I was born in Liberia during the Civil War. Grew up as a refugee in different camps and different countries. Africa, Ghana, Sierra Leone, and England to New Zealand, and now in Australia.
All right. What? Okay. We'll switch to the next topic. Did you? You, Emmanuel, you mentioned you lived in a refugee camp for a while. Could you describe the experience at the refugee camp? How many people were there? How you were treated? And how did you feel once you were out?
Yeah, thank you very much once again. Life in a refugee camp as a child. I told you that up until I was 16, that's when I left those camps. But as you can imagine, from zero, from 1 year to 16, that time of being in the camp, it's somehow so much a tormenting kind of life in terms of what a child is expected to be, given the life in the camps. And if I could say that missing a meal, missing a dinner or a lunch was one of the common factors. And I believe from every human background that access to food becomes the fundamental light to life. And given that situation, you can imagine that we were going to school by then. And when we go to school, while other children elsewhere may be thinking about their homework, going back home, or thinking about whatever stories they will have with their parents, you are in the class, you are hungry, and you're even thinking that what's going to be my next meal? When is it going to be? I guess that's one of the fundamental challenges. Like any child, and I call that a sort of part of the story generation life, because you literally hang on the hope of God to survive the next day. And that's why when you meet or you see refugees, I'm now involved in a settlement program, a regional settlement. But part of what is a requisite for refugees to settle in regional areas is to find a church. And the reason is that refugees survive so much at the hope of God, is thinking that my next chance to live is just owned by God. So in my primary school, I used to sit on a stone as my chair. And again, I use my laps as the desk. That was the kind of life. Even for the blackboard, because we were studying, and the classroom by then was a tree when I did my primary one and primary two. And that tree, we had as students to come with charcoal, the charcoals, and then crushed charcoals mixed with water, and then that forms a sort of black liquid that we would spray on a plywood, a plywood, and then spray it along for it to become black, and then that would be used at the blackboard, being held by the teacher when they are writing, and that was how we had our education. The money to buy chalks for the teachers was being organized by our parents. They could organize some little money, put together some money to buy the chalks, and that really helped us to grow in such an environment that was really deplorable. So
And that's some of red heart memories. Grace, I would like to hear from you. What was your journey like? Could you give us some more context, and if there were some stories that you can share? Did you take on this journey alone, with a family or friends?
For me, I was born during the war, so the Civil War started before I was born. So when I was born, the family, the war separated everyone right in that time. So from like my really early childhood, my grandmother, maternal grandmother, she was my care. She took me by then. She was a nurse in the hospital. So that's how she and myself, she managed to escape with me to La Cote d'Ivoire. I was still young, so but we went there and stayed in refugee camp. For me, some of the experiences over there was like, we didn't have clothes, we didn't have shoes, shelter. We were all just together. Lots of bad stuff happened every time. No one was safe. Rebel was not the only one committing murder, but even within mourners, lots of stuff went on that wasn't really good. So I grew up seeing lots of that. And we had times though, as I grew up, we went to Ghana. from Africa. We used to go to school. Yeah, we had like a bowl, wood bowl that we took to school. And sometimes I couldn't speak French because I didn't really know how to speak French from Liberia back then. And we'll go to school, and sometimes it will be really bad because apparently we're not allowed in some of the school. And yeah, being a refugee, so it was really bad. Sometimes we get beaten up. Sometimes there will be fight between the Liberian community, and so we Liberian, most of us were like Christian, and the community we were living in was like Muslim community. So sometimes there will be fight, and then they'll go into school. Again, they'll be attacking or leave our country. Sometimes they'll burn the camp. Sometimes they'll commit murder and kill people and things like that. So anyway, we left from there into Ghana, and Ghana was not that bad. We were, the older people were kind of in a refugee camp, but as the day went by, for me, the pastors, the church, we went to visit a church, and the pastor, I had some help from the church in Ghana, so we're going to school, and we used to like ride with truck, but from there you have to survive. So I can't remember my age, but I know in Ghana there was no water. Where we were, you have to go so far to go and get water. And sometimes when you get home, but I really wanted to learn. I always wanted to learn. And so in the night, I wanted to be better. I just didn't like the life. So I used to study under the moon because we didn't really have light. So in the night, I remember when I got much older, I would just go, the moon would be so bright, and I would just sit there to do my homework, because if you didn't do your homework, you would get beaten up like that and things like that. And I didn't like getting beaten up. So I'll go and study on the moon. And if I didn't know what to do, I would share water with someone who was like older, maybe get your water to shower, and then you teach me my ABC, you teach me how to write, or you share your book for me or read me a story. So yeah, that's just how we grew up. There was not much food. Sometimes there was meal, sometimes there was no meal. Yeah, so
This is amazing. Living in such an extreme, I cannot even select the right word, extreme conditions and the extreme life situation, and still pursuing the education, not giving up, that deserves the utmost respect. Could you please tell us how did you get the chance to move to Australia, and what was the integration process like?
So
But,
the journey, oh, sorry, send me or Emmanuel.
Oh, let's make it Emmanuel.
Okay, sorry.
All right. My experience to Australia, I guess, was for the integration in the community was not that difficult. On one hand, because of my experience as a refugee, I really intended to. I've grown up thinking that it's a horrible life, and I could assist anyone to live a good life like anyone, kids as well as parents. And that's why when I got into our communities, I found that there were lots of issues. People were struggling. I remember I met two ladies who were saying that in 2005, when they came to Australia, they contemplated to move back to Tanzanian camps. They asked some of the case workers if they could assist them to go back to Tanzania. So while everyone thinks that by coming to Australia, the life is just amazing and you are just getting this wonderful opportunity, the utopia, sort of what people say. I don't think that's the reality. The reality touches someone once they find their life being supported to understand the country and to understand the life. So that's when we started the organization called Great Lakes Agency for Peace and Development, to be able to help those refugees from the camps who are new to Australia to find their way and track their settlement success in Australia. So that's what we do. From there, we've come to have some
We are having some connection issues.
programs that support migrants and where they come from. Most of them come from farming. So that's where we came from, and that's how we are supporting the refugees with this program. And I can tell you, even by now, I'm up in the country. Last night, our liaison officer in Tari called me and told me that there were some issues that I had to go and attend to. So I drove early in the morning to come and attend to some of those experiences. So my integration was not that difficult. However, I found the rest of my community members and colleagues struggling to actually change their life and face the Australian life. And not only the Africans, we've settled some community members from the Indian community who we settled down in Nikuma. We've settled other families from Congolese, from Middle East, different categories. So that's how I see life. My integration in Australia has looked at myself not as the primary the primary just beneficiary, but also looking at others as well on how they can integrate in this journey. And I can tell you that 70% of the people who have settled in regional areas, they have purchased their own properties. And that's from, they have been to regional areas for the last the oldest ones have been there since for 4 years. So you can see that they are fast tracking their settlement success when you compare to someone who lives in Sydney, for example, where after arriving in Australia, some people start to think about buying houses in a period of 5 to 10 years. But these ones, in a period of 4 to 0, they have purchased properties. So I think that's what I can think about and talk of as a settlement success in Australia, not by reflecting on myself alone, but also reflecting on the entire community and those who need support.
This is fantastic. After such a long journey, you're still maintaining the hope and giving hope to others. That's amazing. And as for you, Grace, what was your settlement experience like? How did you manage to move to Australia, and what was your experience when you first landed here?
It was good. I am coming from through, like traveling through different country where it started okay, but it had its own challenges. Growing up, where having a meal, like we have to eat really, really spicy stuff so that you can drink lots of water because there was not enough food. And then you come into a country, there's like lots of milk, there's bread. So it was like, oh wow, so that was that. However, it was a big it was struggle. It was very hard, like to really fit into the culture and understand the way of doing things. It was so hard. The language. So like I transited through England, I actually realized that they are like different English. So every time you learn English, and then it's just really hard because you can't be understood and you can't really understand them. The New Zealand English is different. It didn't really sound like English to me towards the one in England, and then the one here in Australia. So, it's like I really struggled as even in school to fit in. It was really, really hard. Like I really struggle with it with the culture. But another thing is that, I met people like kind people who was always willing to help you up when they know that, they find your interest, so there were lots of miscommunication, things like that. And then different teachers. I know all the teachers that was like maybe English teacher, they all had different English background. I have teacher from England, which are connected. We are a bit more than teachers from Australia, America, and New Zealand. It was like really hard to communicate and to even ask questions. Yeah, so that was what it was like for me. And even with my studies, English was really hard. Yeah.
That's great. Emmanuel, what were the biggest challenges that you faced when you first came to Australia?
I think some of the challenges are cultural shock, where you arrive in a society that looks completely different in what you believe in. I will state an example. Um, I was at Newtown one time, and I saw people kissing on the street. That shocked me and my culture, which I had never experienced openly during the day. So such were some of the things, but we grew to understand that. And one of the other experiences as a refugee is the experience of looking for a job while you have qualifications and you even don't get to an interview, or even when you get to an interview, there was a time when we went to the interview, but apparently when they saw us, the people who were supposed to employ us, they said, look, there is no more job. So, and from our interpretation, that was a sort of racism that we did see in the people who didn't want to employ us, even if they did use as a pretext that the job now is no more, but then you had called us to come for work. So I think those experiences, but the good thing is that as refugees, we've gone through a lot in such a way that we immediately bypass that and think otherwise on how you can navigate through the employment market to be able to get jobs. And while I was thinking about that, I was also thinking other people maybe who can't even express themselves in English. We had people from our countries who spoke only French. Now they are in Australia, where definitely they had access to English, AMP, for example. But you can imagine transitioning from French to English. That was a nightmare. So then finding a job was one of the challenges. And that's why our communities had these lots of so many issues around them. One of them was that they were not employed. I once organized a community consultation with the refugees from the African background. And one gentleman told us how when he arrived in Australia as a peasant, when the war happens, some of us come from deep villages from those small villages where our life is just peasantry. Now you end up in Sydney on level 5 of a house, which you have never lived in, and you are confined into that space. Now, that brought a lot of issues in terms of domestic violence because these people had no jobs. You can imagine as a man sitting in the front of my wife day in, day out, 2 years, 3 years, 5 years. There was lots of depression. And those were some of the challenges to me as well, because I could cry from within. How could we help these people to move a mile away to at least struggle to get a job? And that's why we introduced this regional settlement program, so that even those who came from the background of peasantry can also get some jobs, can get some farming work, can even be able to do some, plant some crops, because some of the people we've moved these regional areas, they practice farming. We've met people there is a nurse, a qualified nurse who was working at the Royal Melbourne Hospital. But he told us that he wanted to move to regional area. And we asked him, why should you want to do so?
Apparently we're having some connection issues again. Anyways, Grace,
He said, because
oh,
I have this
Mayor.
wonderful project that I have never implemented. Can you hear me?
Oh,
Yes,
oh
can.
yeah, now you're back. All right, my next question will be for Grace. Um, have you experienced problems with finding a job, or I know that racism is a very common problem among any kind of migrant in any country. Have you experienced that, and what was it like?
Yes, like I really struggle because my biggest challenge, like I say again, it will kind of be English, and like stereotype is like, because your English is not perfect. Like for me, my experience, I wanted to be a doctor, and I was passionate about it. I really studied hard to be on top. Even in other African country, I would do all I can, even when I didn't have light. But here, overseas, I remember I couldn't enter medical school because I failed physics. I failed physics and statistics. And it was not that they didn't know, but it was like the exam. The way in which it was structured, it just brought me trauma, like how you have to go through the exam hall and the taking things is just like bringing like terrible flashbacks to me. And then someone standing over you, like I would get so shaky and so sweaty, and like that I just lose concentration. Like it was just so bad, like being in a room, in this room, everyone's so serious, like a detention center. um it was really bad. And I changed career, which was okay. I went to health psychology, thinking that it's like you work so hard, but it's so hard to fit in because your English is not what they want it to be. Like you got so much to give, but the English become like this barrier that kind of really cripple your passion and you getting there. And for me, that was the biggest struggle. When I got through from studying health psychology, I was working with like uh, other psychiatrists, psychologists. I like to initiate. I'm an idealist, and like sometimes I'll bring up idea and bring up stuff, but I feel like I always push in the back. And apart from that, being bullied, well, our work in forensic unit, where when they notice anything like no teamwork, you become a target. And also, it was really not nice. So I also changed to education, studied education and social policy, took interest in multicultural education. But right now, I'm still doing what I was doing. So the diploma I did like years ago in health psychology, youth work, and things. So right now I'm still doing support work. I haven't found job. I graduated 2011, and then when I changed career, I graduated in 2019. But I still can't find job. I'll go for interview, and they always find someone who is more competent. So you just find yourself doing what you have to do. I enjoy what I do, but I feel like there's more to give, and I'm limited in the job market because my English might not be what they want. Yeah, so that's the biggest challenge.
Unfortunately, that happens a lot, and I don't know what to do with that. Unfortunately, we lost Emmanuel due to some connection issues, and I hope he'll join us or if he manages to fix them. We've got a guest question that Grace, I'll ask you to answer. One of the guests writes, not sure if it was Grace or Emmanuel, saying that they had to speak some French during their education. What languages did you grow up speaking? And what was your first language?
Um, I can't even say my first. It was something like Yakuba. Yakuba is like the Muslim language in La Cote d'Ivoire. So they got this. It's like Dan. It's mixed, So I used to talk Yakuba, and then the French. I don't know French. like I said, I'm not sure about first language and that, but I know I was talking Yakuba. And then in Ghana, I started picking up some language, but I couldn't really stay one place for long. So, but I talk more Creole in Sierra Leone because I was much more like, a bit older there. Yeah.
It's very incredibly multilingual.
Mm.
That's amazing. Emmanuel, welcome back.
Thank you. Sorry.
We're speaking about languages. Grace ended up speaking more language than, anyways. We've got a question from our guest who writes, not sure if it was Grace or Emmanuel, saying that they had to speak some French during their education. What languages did you grow up speaking, and what was your first language?
My first language is Kinyarwanda, but then being a refugee in Uganda, I ended up speaking more than 8 languages because that country has so many languages. So I can understand even the languages from Congo, the Burundi, Tanzania, as well as Uganda, all those bordering countries. I do speak French as well as Swahili and then English. So altogether, they may come up to 9 languages that I do speak. So the experience here definitely is that you have to learn to speak English, and with time, you grow in English and then you lose the other languages, because as much as you don't practice any language, then you disappear into the new language and you lose the others. However, I still speak some French and I still speak Swahili. I do interviews on radios and radios, especially local languages in those languages here in Australia. So yeah, it's here. It didn't really impact me so much because I had grown up in Uganda. Therefore, I had English as my background.
I'm still struggling to learn some German, and you guys are speaking so many languages. That's incredible. I've got a final question for you because our webinar is coming to an end. And so, as I mentioned in the beginning, every year the Refugee Week has a topic, and the 2021 topic is the unity. And as the official slogan goes, unity is the way forward. That we totally agree with. And the organization is calling on the existing and emerging communities to work together to build a strong and cohesive society. And only then we can thrive and progress. So my question to you is, what does the Refugee Week and the topic of unity mean for you? And we'll start with Grace.
Refugee Week for me, it's a week of hope and new beginning. Yeah.
I could totally see that. That's amazing how throughout this whole journey you managed to maintain this hope. Incredible. And for you, Emmanuel, what does the Refugee Week mean for you? And what do you think of the topic of unity?
I think the Refugee Week depicts the resilience and the strengths of refugees, because if you take a country like Australia, it has been built by refugees as well on a big site. When you look at the bigger entrepreneurs of this country, you will find that the first 10 might be refugees. So I guess it's reflecting on those strengths. The journey we've moved definitely is a long journey and a harsh one, but which really depicts our resilience, our commitment to life, but also our commitment to help others, to help other refugees around the world, and be a voice for those who are still trapped in that kind of scenario. One of the challenges you find with refugees is that most of them don't want people to call them refugees. They feel that a refugee is a person who is at that receiving end of the society, but not necessarily that. We have refugees who came to Australia after the First World War and the Second World War. They have grown strongly. They are the very big, they have big foundations that do support refugees. So I guess it's a holistic way of understanding that for those who are still trapped in that life, it's hope. For those who are not refugees, we need to say that refugees are a strong human that you can rely on as a force to work, but also as a new society that like Australia.
I believe if anyone would look into their family history, there would be at least one refugee in their family line.
Exactly.
So thank you so much. I think our webinar is coming to an end, and I would like to thank everyone, all our guests, for joining us today, and particularly to our amazing speakers, Grace and Emmanuel, for taking time to share such important stories with us. If you have any, the guests, if you have any follow-up questions, then feel free to contact us through info@loadagency.com.au or via our website or LinkedIn, whichever way is more convenient for you. We'll be making the webinar recording available in the coming days, and we'll email you when it's live, so you'll not miss it. Thanks again, and have a great weekend all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
See you again.